Welcome to Dig Deep, the mining podcast. In this podcast, we go deep into mining news, hot topics, and live interviews with mining professionals and leading figures in the mining industry. Introducing your host, Rob Tyson, founder and director of Mining International and Mining International Executive, a leading global mining recruitment and headhunting agency.
Hi, mining community. Welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep, the mining podcast. And we have a returning guest today who appeared back in June 2021, which was nearly 3 years ago, episode 145. Chris Gerteisen, who is the executive director and CEO of Nova Minerals, a minerals explorer and developer focused on gold and low-cost gold producer, having built up inventory of nearly 10 million ounces in resources, which continues to grow rapidly, both in size and more importantly, confidence levels. They've got 21 prospects, including 2 already found large deposits. Nova is unlocking the wider Estelle Gold Trend, similar to its scale and potential to resources like the Nevada Carlin Trend, one of the richest gold mines or gold districts in the world. Chris is a geologist by background and has over 25 years managing advanced, complex and challenging resource projects across the world. And he's going to talk about developing North America's next major gold trend, moving quickly towards joining the ranks of 10 million ounces explorers in Alaska, and the recent discovery of multiple advanced projects. It's quite interesting, obviously, talking about a project of Estelle's magnitude, one obviously to consider as a major asset would own, but with the market cap of a junior, which in itself is obviously quite exceptional, an exceptional opportunity. So let's have no further ado, and that's introduce Chris. So how you doing, Chris?
Hey, great to be with you, Ralph. It's been a while. Good
It's been nearly 3 years. So for those that didn't listen to that previous podcast, which was nearly 3 years ago, just wondering if you just give us a quick overview of yourself and your background and your career. Obviously, as I mentioned in the introduction, you have worked all around the world. So yeah, just wondering if you can tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I'm an economic geologist. I'm actually from Alaska, and I started my career here in Alaska working on these intrusive related gold systems, which we have at Estelle, in fact, just up north in the Fairbanks area. But I spent a lot of time with the likes of Newmont, Barrick down on the Carlin Trend, so I'm quite familiar with that area in Nevada. And these are very bulk tonnage, complex mining operations, lots going on, which is really relevant experience for what we're doing here at Estelle. And the Australian connection comes in, Nova being an ASX listed company, comes in because I spent a lot of time in Australia working there as well, throughout Australia, but mainly in the gold fields of Western Australia, in Kalgoorlie, reborn and rebred in Kalgoorlie, Western Australia, I like to say. And sort of one of the major projects I worked on there, major achievement, if you will, was the Carosue Dam project. I was on the team. We discovered that and brought that into production. And that was in the early 90s. And it's still going today, I see. Northern Star, the most recent current owner of that project, and they're going underground on that. So that's always good to see, another project you've been involved with decades of mine life. I spent a lot of time in Southeast Asia, Indonesia with Newmont at the Batu Hijau Porphyry Copper Gold project. Also in Laos with the team of Oxiana. We brought Sepon online as another copper gold project. And then with another Australian company, Panost, with Pukam in Laos there, copper gold. And then we discovered Banhui Sai, silver gold deposit. So, and then Thailand and things like that. But I've come full circle now. I'm back home in Alaska. And what my niche has really become and kind of my specialty and what I really enjoy doing is taking resource stage projects and bringing them into production. And that's exactly what we're trying to achieve here at Estelle.
Yeah, so I just wondered if you can give us an overview of Nova Minerals and obviously a little bit about the projects they're involved in.
Sure. So it's the Estelle Gold Project here in Alaska, about 100 miles from Anchorage and the valley, as we call it, which is the main population center here in South Central Alaska. It's in the Tintina Gold Province. So this has been one of the most prolific belts in recent decades. It's the land of the intrusive related gold system. Some of the other players in our neighborhood are Kinross with their flagship Fort Knox deposit, Victoria Gold over on the Yukon side with their recent startups at the Dublin Gulch project, Pogo, Northern Star, there to the north of us. To the west of us is the Donlin deposit, which is Barrick Nova Gold JV, 40 million ounces there. So all of these I've just stated, 10 million ounce plus deposits, not uncommon in our neighborhood, and that's certainly what we're onto at Estelle. At Estelle, it's a large property, 513 square kilometers, and in less than 5 years now, let's say 5 years, we've taken this project from greenfields to 10 million ounces defined resources. And those resources are in two deposits. Up north, we have Korbel, which is a very large bulk tonnage system. And 8 million ounces there in that Korbel Valley. We think at the end of the day, there'll be 10 million ounces in that Korbel Valley alone. And then down south, which a relatively more recent discovery, what's really become the jewel in the crown for many people, is the RPM deposit. And the RPM deposit, about 1.2 million ounces there currently in 3 different zones. And these have the potential and the likelihood to actually merge and connect into one much larger deposit and become a 2 or 3 million ounce deposit. But at RPM, it has a very high grade core, about 500,000 ounces at 2 grams there. And then in addition to those two, across the claims, we have 20 plus other known prospects at various stages of advancement for gold, copper, silver, and more recently, we've discovered significant critical elements, the likes of antimony, the rare earth elements, potential there, bismuth, tellurium, lanthanum, yttrium. There's about 15 of them there. And that's a very exciting development because there's a big push. We've lost all that production. There's no U.S. production of many of these things or negligible. And the opportunity there is to reestablish and resecure U.S. supply chains for many of these elements, which is why we're going after them and getting widespread support, not only from the state, but from the federal government. And there's a really good opportunity there. And it's a beautiful thing because these are coincident with our gold deposits. So we're not doing a major diversion off. We're a gold company, right? We're after the gold, but it's not a major diversion. These will be byproducts from our gold operations.
Obviously, with such a large gold trend and the rapid resource growth that you've experienced, what are the core aims of the company in the short, medium, and long term, and for the market cap to reflect the size and value of the project?
Right. Bottom line, we're on a path to production. So we're not here to flip the project or anything like that. We're an aspiring gold producer. So currently, we've completed a scoping study. That was last year. And as a company, we wanted to see, get a snapshot in time. Are we onto a viable project here? What does this thing look like? And the results we felt were very positive. And what it showed was just the resources we had at that time at Korbel and RPM was a 17-year mine life with an 11-month payback period that just goes to show you with that high-grade RPM coming in early, how valuable that is. 11-month payback period, 53% internal rate of return, 650 million NPV, producing almost 2.3 million ounces over 17 years. And all of this is at a $1,800 gold price, right? And so when we did our sensitivity studies at a $2,000 gold price, this becomes a $1 billion NPV project. And now what are we sitting at today? Pushing 2,400. So well over $1 billion NPV with what we had over a year ago. So since that time, we've done additional drilling last year that is not included in the resources for that scoping study. And now we're moving into the PFS stage. So we're in the PFS stage. We're honing in on many of these things, looking to improve the technical aspects and find efficiencies. Those studies have been going on, and that includes environmental studies. We're way ahead of the curve on that to be able to start our permitting process once the PFS is complete. That includes hydrology, rock geochemistry, fish studies, and those are the main ones there. And wetlands mapping, that's another big one. And those all look very positive, by the way, in terms of permitting, because I should add, we're all on state land here on our project. And that's a very important point to make, because there's no federal land or native corporation land that we have to contend with on our project. So that's a big bonus and positive when it comes to just day-to-day operating environment. Very pleasant working with the state, very supportive of the project resource economy here in Alaska. So they've been very encouraging. And then when it comes to permitting, that'll be a much more streamlined process to do the permitting, just working mainly with the state entities. So we've been doing that. Metallurgical studies are a big one, finding all kinds of optimizations and efficiencies there. Of course, one thing we're looking at now is heap leach, similar to our peers, similar to Fort Knox, Kinross, and Dublin Gulch, which is all heap leach. We were looking at heap leach to take our low-grade material and heap leach it. We didn't have that in the scoping study, and that's a game changer in terms of the numbers, because a lot of that material that we were going to process through a plant will be doing heap leach. It's a very low-cost recovery method. And then, of course, our high-grade RPM and some higher-grade material at Korbel will go through our plant, our mill and our plant, and then we'll classify a medium-grade material. And that medium grade material will go through ore sorting, because if you understand these deposits, it's one rock type, an intrusive granodiorite, and you have these sheeted veins that go through there, very continuous, very discrete mineralogy, very easily identifiable. And when you selectively sample those veins, they're running ounces per ton. So the challenge is, how do you separate out those veins and get rid of all the waste material? Enter ore sorting. We've done extensive test work using ore sorting, and the best method is the density XRT ore sorting for your techno files out there. The density XRT ore sorting, and it just ore sorts exceptionally well. We've seen 10-time upgrades. We can take 0.4 gram material and upgrade this stuff to 4 or 5 grams per ton. So anyway, that's what we do with the medium grade material. We'll be putting it through the ore sorters, focusing on maximizing grade for the accepted portion, get that portion, take it through our mill, and then the lower grade reject out of the ore sorters will go to the heap leach, right? So the heap leach, now we have a processing option for our lower grade material out of the ore sorters. Before, in the scoping study, we just sent that stuff to waste and kind of focused more on recovery, gold recovery. And so our fraction coming off the ore sorters that we accepted was much lower grade, because we're trying to capture as much of the gold as we could. Now we don't have to be so concerned with that. We can focus on the grade, because we know that the reject out of the ore sorter is going to get processed as well through the low cost heap leach option. So that's the kind of things we're working on. We're in the PFS. We will be doing drilling this year. We have an extensive drilling program planned to focus mainly on RPM for resource drilling. Lots of work to do there. Infill, step out. It's wide open. It's currently a 1.2 million ounce deposit. And we believe once we do this infill drilling, this thing has the possibility to be 2-3 million ounces. And so we want to, get closer and closer to realizing that target. And that'll be a major component to get as much measured and indicated resource classified, because then we can convert that into reserves for our PFS. So that's what's planned this year. Also, that's the path, the production path. But it's such a large project with all these other prospects and all these other opportunities, that we'll be having a very extensive exploration program as well. Following up the Train prospect area, which is about 5 kilometers to the north of RPM. That's another one of these massive intrusive related gold systems, with up to 132 grams per ton rock chips. 40s and 50 gram per ton rock chips are the norm, and you get these places 90 grams. Our highest grade rock chip ever came from this area of 1,290 grams per ton. And it's a very large area, 4.5 kilometer strike, 2.5 kilometer width, and there's a number of prospects and anomalies in there, and some of them have very good gold, but also 5-6% copper, thousands of grams per ton silver, and antimony. Very good antimony and other critical elements. And I'm talking about, when I say critical elements, I'm talking about antimony, bismuth, tellurium, yttrium, lanthanum, to name a few. There's about 15 of them there, the rare earth elements. And so we tend to focus on those as well in that train area and elsewhere to start to build up the project for these critical elements. Because don't forget, there's no U.S. production of critical elements, zero, of many of these, and a little bit of some, but it's negligible. It's all controlled. It's controlled by foreign imports is how we get it to America, and a lot of it controlled by some of our adversaries, China, Russia, these kind of things. And so there's a big push by the federal government, by the it's a whole full court press, state government, to reestablish and fully secure U.S. supply chains for critical elements. And these agencies have taken a major interest in our project because of what we've seen there in these significant discoveries of antimony and other critical elements. So there's an opportunity there. And it's coincident with the gold. So it's not a major diversion as a gold company, not a major diversion. What we're looking at is to have a project where we process for the gold and then we extract these critical elements out of the waste stream. And so we'll be doing exploration for that. Our goal and our schedule currently has us coming out with a PFS, completing that by end of 2025. I mean, it depends what we find this year. If we find wide open spaces of high grade gold at RPM, we may extend that a bit. But our goal is to have that by the end of 2025, PFS. We could achieve that. And then we'll, with the environmental studies and these things going along concurrently, to submit for permitting at that stage. And then we will go straight into our bankable feasibility study, do the usual project financing. We believe that we could be producing here by 28, 29. Some other things need to fall into place. There is, infrastructure, always a big thing with these projects. And when it comes to access, I mean, we support the project year round through our 4,000-foot airstrip there at the site to bring in very large aircraft. We also seasonally use a winter road, very common in this part of the world, bringing a lot of heavy equipment that way, our drill rigs, these kind of things. But we're becoming very excited now about the West Susitna Access Road project. So this is a 100-mile road that will tie in the Estelle project, or the West Susitna Mining District, there's other players in the area, to Port Mackenzie. That's basically the deep water port for Anchorage. So we'll be tied into the rail system, the port, the road system. And that has been, that is currently, the first part of that road is already in the Department of Transportation State Transportation Infrastructure Plan. And they're looking to break ground on that next year. So, and their schedule has that road fully open for business by 2028. So that needs to come online. And then power, lots of options there, and we need to decide on one. But what do we have in terms of power? The Donlin project is just to the west of us. They have a proposed gas pipeline that'll pass about 10 miles to the north of us. So potential offtake there for gas. There's coal in the area, and they're looking to build a thermal coal-fired power plant. Not averse to that in Alaska. We have 4 or 5 of these coal power. We're trying to stay warm here, Rob, right? No time to goof around. So the most recent coal-fired power plant in America was actually built about 4 or 5 years ago up in the Fairbanks area. So that it's the cleanest thermal coal basin in the world, apparently. And so that'll be a transmission line of about 20 miles. Also, we have just take the transmission line straight to the Beluga Power gas field, power source that feeds into Anchorage and everywhere. But that's about a 70-mile transmission line. Also, interestingly, we've looked at micro-nuclear reactors. These modular nuclear reactors, big push for that in Alaska. A lot of the Alaska Native villages want these things, get away from the diesel. And the first one there is set to go into the Fairbanks area as well in 2026, as I understand. And I've spoken to Westinghouse and one out of the UK called Nano Nuclear, who seem to be the leaders in this technology. And the technology is all there. It all works. They've been using this in some way, shape, or form on nuclear subs for decades anyway. It's a regulatory issue at this stage. And these are all good options because, of course, the capital expenditure is borne by these companies, and then you just do a long-term power purchase agreement. So, and then of course there's just the typical diesel generators, which are quite efficient and clean these days as well. So that's always an option. We'll of course choose what fits our needs and our timeline, but we have lots of options there.
Yeah. Nobody has described its Estrella project as the Carlin of the North. Being obviously based in Alaska and having obviously over 25 years in mine operations and obviously building mines, and obviously taking 7 projects to exploration through to production, including the Carlin Trend in Nevada. What are your observations of Estrella to those other projects that you have worked on? What are some of the similarities?
Right. So I spent time on the Carlin Trend, and actually that was cool. I was talking to an old colleague, and telling him about from the Carlin days, and showing him our project, and it was his words. He was like, "This is like the Carlin Trend." Certainly, the geology is different, but in terms of scale and potential resource endowment, this is what at the end of the day, when you sit back and you see what's developing here, it's very similar. 35-kilometer long strike length on the trend, multiple deposits and prospects. Remember the Carlin Trend, which made companies like Newmont and Barrick, by the way, right? Made companies with that. They're still going there today. Initially, they really started in the 60s, in the 60s there, and it was one of those projects. People ignored it for ages, and then the geologists had ideas, and then they made their first discoveries, and it was off to the races from there. And so we're seeing a very similar, I think to date, of 140 million ounces in total resources are in the Carlin Trend. And you can just see in our resource growth trajectory, every year we drilled in the last 5 years, we're increasing resources by 1 million ounces, 2 million ounces a year. I mean, now we're not so focused on growing the resource. That's almost the low-hanging fruit. What we're focused on is infill drilling, because it's not just about resource quantity, it's about resource quality. And we're focused on infill drilling and proving up the resources into the measured and indicated categories. But you just see, when you look at the map, the prospects, how widespread they are across the entire trend that we're seeing, that it definitely has the potential, and it's already shaping up that way, to be the Carlin of the North. Or perhaps they'll rename the Carlin Trend in Nevada the Estelle of the South. Perhaps that'll be happening at the end of the day. Who knows, right?
Obviously, you mentioned drilling is continuing at Estella. What is the company's goal? And can you obviously tell us about the high-grade feeder system with the Korbel deposit and the potential at Cathedral with the wider Korbel Valley?
At Korbel, it's a bulk tonnage, lower grade system. So average grade there is 0.3 grams per ton. 800 million tons at Korbel, Maine. And then at Cathedral, which is just a maiden resource, we've done 1 round of drilling there and already defined 2 million ounces there. So with Korbel and Cathedral combined, they're right next to each other, about 500 meters apart. At a minimum, we see Cathedral shaping up to be another Korbel, Maine. So over 1 billion tons already, and perhaps when we go to our next drilling program at Cathedral, can be multi-billion tons of this 0.3 gram material, right? Okay, so but if you understand, let's take the Korbel, Maine ore body. The Korbel, Maine ore body, 800 million tons, 0.3 grams per ton. There is a higher grade feeder structure that rips through the middle there, and it's quite continuous. And what am I talking about higher grade? I'm talking about 100 meters at a gram, 120 meters at 1.2 grams. These type of intercepts that define that feeder structure. And so there's over 1 million ounces just in that high grade feeder. And sometimes people ask, well, why do you include all of that lower grade material around the edges, or the hundreds of millions of tons of lower grade material? If you understand this ore body, it's an intrusive rock type. It's there's these high grade veins I think I was telling you about before. You selectively sample those. They're very high grade, ounces per ton. And out in the lower grade areas, it's not a grade issue per se. It's a vein density is less. And so with the ore sorting, we're able to separate out those high grade veins. And so, it's the simple answer to why do we include those resources in our resource is because we can make money at it. Very good money, because the ore sorting works so exceptionally well, right? And we've proven that. And now with the heap leach, we can actually reduce the capex, because initially in our scoping study, we were looking at ore sorting all of it, and that required many more ore sorters, a much bigger plant and mill to do a whole of ore sorting and then put it all through the mill. Whereas now with the heap leach, we can take the lower grade portion, put it to the heap leach, higher grade goes straight to the mill, that high grade feeder zone, and then that medium grade to do as I described, ore sort it, focus on grain, take it to the mill, and the lower grade gets goes off to the heap leach, and that'll bring down the capex. Less ore sorters, the plant size can come down, bring down the capex. Well, remember, the ore sorting comes in the later years, right? So we have the RPM high grade, the Korbel high grade feeder. That'll be the first 2, 3, 4 years of production, and then the ore sorters will come on later in the piece. And we've already paid back. We've already de-risked and paid everything back in less than a year, and then the ore sorters come on. And so that's at Korbel, Maine. So at Cathedral, we see a similar type of ore body as Korbel, Maine. So it's very, very exciting there.
With the company looking to list on the ADR and on the US big bulls, and looking at Nova's North American peers such as Snowline, Newfound Gold, and obviously the likes, the company seems pretty undervalued on this basis. What's the feedback with the US listing on the ADR?
Very, very good. So our logic there is that being on the ASX, I feel we're underappreciated or not fully appreciated. It's a different conversation when it's a North American asset, bulk tonnage systems like we've been talking about in Australia. The Australian investor, in my mind, seems to be focused more on Australia and these higher grade, smaller vein systems, and a lot of focus on Africa there in Australia. And in North America, it's a North American asset. You look at our peers, very similar, some of them which you've named, and they are getting valuations 3, 4, or more times than we have, and they're not even as advanced as we are, right? Some of these names that you talked about, that you just mentioned there, and these are great projects, don't get me wrong, but some of them don't even have a resource out yet. No resource. They haven't done a PEA like we have. They haven't, so we're much more advanced in these projects than a lot of our peers here, and they're getting valuations, multiples of ours. And I think that when we talk to the U.S. investor, being a North American asset, that we get that kind of appreciation, and it's very supportive, very supportive to come and list in the U.S. We've been looking at it for a number of years, and now we're going to do it, and it's ideal timing, if you ask me. Who is to know? It seems to be like we're going into a gold bull market now, and there's no bull market like a gold bull market, and U.S. markets are just, the liquidity, the volumes are just, much bigger than on the ASX. So I think it's our time to step up, get over into the U.S., and the feedback so far has been very, very positive. We're very advanced with that process right now. We've filed publicly. I believe that, we'll see. It's up to the SEC. Our technical report has passed. If you had to go through the whole technical report process, a different system here. In Australia's JORC here, they call it SK 1300, which is a relatively new standard that they developed. The Canadians have their 43101, Australians have their JORC. The Americans have to have their own now. So we do. SK 1300, and we went through that process, and that report has passed, or it looks like it's passed. We haven't had any major questions on that. So that was one of the major hurdles. And I believe that by, within 6 to 8 weeks, I believe we could be listed and moving forward, moving into a gold bull market. So positive all around.
What do you think is the next catalyst for the significant, obviously, re-rating of Nova Minerals?
So we just spoke about the U.S. listing. I think that'll be a big one. That'll be a big one because there's a lot of pension funds and investors in America here that can't invest in Australia listed companies. And so we've spoken to a number of those, and a number of those would like to invest in us, but they haven't been able to in the past. So now that's open to them. I think we'll get, our shareholder base will certainly increase through that. So that'll be a main catalyst. And just the fact that, like I said, we're going into a gold bull market. Another big catalyst, and it's just been achieved, is the West Susitna Access Road. The West Susitna Access Road, and that ties us in and gives us that road access. And like I said, the first part of that road has now been approved. The second part of the road that comes out to where we are is being run out by ADIA. That's the Alaska Industrial Development Export Authority. They do all the public-private partnership projects here in Alaska. They did the Red Dog Zinc road and port. That was a very successful project. They're working on a number of other projects in Alaska. They have their last bit of field studies to do this summer, and just to tie up a few loose ends, and then they're going to submit for permitting probably by the end of the year. And so once that is in, then that's one of the things in Alaska. People say, "Oh, another great project you can't get to." Well, we're already pretty close to it. We're not way out there like some of these projects. We're already, we're 100 miles from Anchorage, right? So once this road comes in, we're basically a suburb of Anchorage. So that'll be a big catalyst. Also, through the years, I've spoken to a lot of major companies, major producers, mid tiers as well. We're on their radar. A lot of them are looking for us to advance a bit further. Some of them want us to see it get to PFS. And like I said, we're not here to flip the project, but a strategic partner like that, I think we're pretty close to something like that. Certainly, once we get this U.S. listing, we do another successful drilling program this year. We make some more very significant discoveries with our exploration this year. We're pretty close to that. So bringing in a major partner like that as a strategic investor would be a major catalyst as well. Those are the main ones. Now, on the technical side, some of these things I've been talking about. The heap leach, that test work is happening now, looking good so far, but delivering that, reporting that to market, that we've had a successful test and heap leach is possible. We'll be doing more ore sorting test work. Now we're working with a company called Steinert. So I mentioned the XRT density ore sorting works exceptionally well. Steinert has ore sorters that also have multiple sensors on them. Not only they have XRT, and color ore sorting, laser ore sorting, and induction ore sorting. Don't ask me all the details of how but they're different. And so using multiple sensors on the ore sorter can potentially even be more effective. So, and what we plan to do there is we're going to Korbel and we're going to do a pilot scale test. So actually do a 200,000 ton test, bring an ore sorter out in the field, have a small operation there. We got to do like a mining operation. We'll grade control it, this small pilot pit, grade control it, put it through the ore sorter, run a number of tests over 6 to 9 months, and de-risk the whole ore sorting. There has been with some people might not be familiar with ore sorting. Well, we're going to de-risk it, and we plan to carry that out starting next year and probably in 2026. So that'll be a big catalyst for those folks that aren't very familiar with ore sorting. We'll show in real life that how the ore sorting works, and it's gonna be a major catalyst. I feel those are some of them.
On a personal capacity, you've invested in the company yourself and quite heavily now, and along with some of the other directors. How do you see Nova from an investor point of view?
That's correct, Rob. In fact, we've the directors and management have participated in all the capital raisings, including the most recent one, which we just did as a bridge. It was a smaller raise, just as a bridge finance to shore up the balance sheet as we move into this U.S. listing. And so we've always participated. Directors and management own about 15% of the company. We own 50% of the company, and I would say close associates, family, friends own approximately 30% of the company. Our major institutional holder is Nabari Gold Fund, and we have a debt with them $5 million. And the only reason we took on that debt because they also took on a very large equity piece as well. So, and they've been so supportive and has been so supportive, and they have expressed the interest to continue working with us and coming on further capital raises. As an investor, look, our ounces in the ground are valued at less than $1 per ounce. I mean, the leverage to the gold price for a project like this is just phenomenal, right? It's one of those once in a lifetime things. I look around gold. I'm no macroeconomist or analyst or expert analyst in this field, but I'm just a simple guy, and I look around and I see things like, oh, the U.S. is adding $1 trillion to the debt every 3 months. Whoa, right? So, or the largest expenditure in the U.S. budget is now servicing the debt. These kind of things, Rob, right? So, those kind of things ring a bell to me because the U.S. dollar is the reserve currency and all that. I know that gold's been an asset or money for 5,000 years, so I don't think it's going anywhere. We haven't had a true gold bull run in, I don't know, 20, 30 years now. I can't keep track, but it's been a long time.
50 years. For
a solid asset of real money like this, and it looks to be, I don't know, and I've been saying it for 20 years, but this might be it. This might be the start of a true gold bull run. It's an opportunity of a lifetime, one of those once in a generation type investments. And so how you leverage yourself to the gold price, whether it's buying gold or gold equities, certainly, Nova warrants a look. Have a look at what we're doing with our resource base of 10 million ounces, all of these things we're doing to de-risk and advance the project, move all these catalysts we've been discussing. It's and now with this, so we're so undervalued relative to our peers in North America. We're coming to North America. So I think that's the kind of lens that an investor should look at Nova Minerals and consider it as an investment. I can't give investment advice, but you're right. I put a lot of my own skin in the game, as they say, and I'm very confident that it's going to be a great run here coming up. Also, Rob, don't forget, I can't speak enough about the critical minerals. Antimony. We've made significant antimony discoveries out there. What do I know about antimony? I'm a gold guy, right? I'm dabbling.
What is it?
Well,
what
some
is
people
it
feel
anyway?
like alimony. Oh my gosh, right? No, antimony. So come to find out, antimony. I've heard of antimony, but I've never worked in antimony. But come to find out, these things, antimony, these rare earths, they found us out there. We're out looking for gold, and what we found out there in terms of antimony are massive stibnite veins on the surface, right? On the surface there. And stibnite's the main ore mineral for antimony. And so come to find out, antimony is one of the most strategic, critical elements known to man in so many civilian and defense applications, including, I like to, your iPhone. Why doesn't the glass scratch so easy? Antimony is used to harden glass and ceramics. That's one thing. It's used in all these batteries. There's one of these batteries that Bill Gates and crew is working on with Ambry called the liquid metal battery, antimony calcium. The fastest growing part of the demand is in photovoltaic cells, solar panels, photovoltaic, and defense applications. This is why the DoD and some of these federal agencies have taken such interest in the project, is that it's used in the munitions. It's used in all kinds of night vision goggles. It's also used in microelectronics, semiconductors, the gallium antimonide substrates, and we even have indium. There's the indium antimonide substrates. That's the base of these chips that they make. It goes on, and we produce none of this stuff in the U.S. And it's controlled 90% by China, mainly Russia. They have all the refining capacity, and so we're looking to reestablish that in America, and from mining to refining. And so we're actually looking in that space with support from our partners in the government, look at extracting these critical minerals and going all the way down to the refining stage. So it's still early days and on the early days with that, but it's certainly something we're looking at with the support of our partners. We can do that, right? We can do that. And so those are the critical minerals adds a whole nother catalyst to what we're doing here, and it appears to be very elevated concentrations for some of these things, particularly antimony, and that one for sure. And then some of these other ones, you have to do a bit more work to find out which ones we're going to actually be able to extract. And remember, it's not an antimony mine, or it's not a rare earth mine, or a tungsten mine, which we also have. So the economics don't depend on that. We have the gold, so it's a byproduct. We're looking for byproduct credits, and that's I think the way you can start to produce these again in domestically here in the U.S. is if they're byproducts, and the whole economics of the operation doesn't depend on any one particular of these critical elements. And so that's something that the investors need to consider.
Yeah. And lastly, what's the outlook for the next sort of 6 to 12 months for Nova Minerals? What's your plan of action?
Okay, so U.S. listing, we'll start drilling again in June. So this summer, very aggressive field season with drilling. RPM resource is the main focus, plus starting to drill some holes into these exciting targets we have for gold, silver, copper, critical elements at Train, because we believe at Train, that is our best bet and the most promising prospect area for a third resource. To join RPM and Korbel at Train, we believe we can make another significant discovery and resource to get over that 10 million ounces and beyond. Plus, there's the antimony and critical minerals potential there as well. So drilling, both resource and exploration drilling, and mainly those two areas. Exploration, surface exploration. Remember, it's mostly virgin country, mostly outcropping here. It doesn't require complex, deep searching, expensive exploration techniques. I mean, we're just going for low hanging fruit. We see everything on the surface. It's old school geologists, boots on the ground, and they literally find new prospects every day they're out there, right? Almost every day they're out there, they find it's on the surface. So we're going for surface, open pit style type extractable resources right now. That's the low hanging fruit. There is underground potential. I mean, these things extend to depth, but we'll worry about that in the future when the time comes. So those type of things. Then come up with a resource update, a mineral resource update by the end of the year. We'll see how how long we take that drilling, end of the year or early next year. And the studies are happening as we speak concurrently. Metallurgical studies, environmental studies keep going. That we'll be working on that PFS to try to get that out. Hopefully by the end of 2025. It might extend a bit further if we do want to do some more drilling next year. If we have if RPM remains wide open and there's just so much more value there to realize. But and then into permitting and beyond, so that we can be in production by 2028, 2029 with the gold, as well as maybe some of these other things like antimony come online a bit sooner, because we could focus on one of these prospects just with antimony. It's so much a smaller scale than the gold project. It's just driving in and following the antimony veins, and it would be a very small operation to get some cash flow into the company. And the permitting, because of the footprint is so small, the permitting would be much less involved, and so that could come online much sooner. We're exploring that idea to get some cash flow and start providing some antimony to the U.S. market. But those are the exciting things happening this year.
Chris, really appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on the podcast again. It's this year. It's going to be a very busy year, as it probably has been the last few years. And we shouldn't leave it as long last time. It was 3 years since we last spoke. So hopefully you can come on next year and give us an update on obviously the projects that you're involved in.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for inviting me, Rob. And let's not leave us so long next time. Although I think we got good meat on the bone this time. Lots happened.
Certainly did. And if our audience wants to follow the story, wants to get updates from yourself, what social media platforms are you on, and how can they get access to some of the information that you put out there?
Okay. novaminerals.com.au. All the links to all the other Twitters and things are there, but you'll see in visual 3D interactive information there. Everything I've spoke about today, you can dig a bit deeper. You can dig deep on the website, get everything I've talked about today in more detail, and I think you'll find that we're onto something very special here.
Yeah, and it sounds it as well. And obviously, all the best for the remainder of this year and next year until we speak again. Appreciate your time again.
Excellent. Thanks for having me, Ryan.
No worries. Hope you enjoyed the episode. As you can see, Chris is really passionate about developing these projects. Huge resources, obviously not just in gold, but in some critical metals as well. So please follow their story. If you've got any questions, obviously feel free to reach out to Chris. And obviously we wish him all the best in the future. Appreciate your continued support. Please keep sharing these episodes far and wide. And as I always say, not just with people in the mining industry, but people outside of the mining industry. We need to improve the brand of mining, and we can only do that by sharing this information with people outside of our industry. So as always, appreciate your continued support. And until next time, happy mining.
Thank you for listening. Remember to reach out to Rob via the show notes and be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Until next time, happy mining, helping each other to improve the mining industry.